Hello my dear students. Today we are moving on to lesson number 7, Natural Hazards and Disasters. Children, you are very lucky that you have taken geography as a subject because in this chapter we will be studying about various phenomena which are related to our day-to-day life, which is related to our life which is very precious. Let's try to understand what are hazards and disasters. In this chapter, we will go through various mitigation strategies needed to save our life, and we will also study as to which regions in India are vulnerable to which type of disaster. When you see around you, don't you think everything changes? Yes, the trees they grow, the soil it forms, it gets eroded. So, change is a continuous process that goes uninterruptedly. Various phenomena are involved, whether big or small, whether material or non-material. The whole of the physical, socio-cultural environment keeps on changing. It is a process everywhere which varies in terms of magnitude. Children, try to observe whatever is around you, trees, soil or various other phenomena. You will see that everything changes. Change is a continuous process that goes uninterruptedly. It involves various phenomena, small, big, material, non-material. The whole of the physical and socio-cultural environment keeps on changing. Change, it is a process present everywhere, but its intensity, its magnitude and the scale changes. There are certain processes, certain changes which are very slow. There are certain changes which are gradual and swift. The gradual process, slow process, they result in the evolution of landforms. Think the formation of Himalayas, the eroding away of Aravalis. Aravalis once upon a time were very high mountains, but the height has reduced due to the slow processes, due to the agents of gradation. It can be a sudden or swift processes. A day you get up, in the morning your parents tell you, we felt an earthquake in the night. You see the news, volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods. So all these processes, they are sudden and swift. Certain changes, certain processes, they remain to a smaller area, whereas the other processes, they involve huge area. For example, let's talk about torrential rain, hailstorms, tornadoes. They are confined to a smaller area occurring within a few seconds. Whereas, think of global warming, think of the ozone layer getting depleted. That is a global process which affects the whole of the earth. Now, these changes, they have different meaning for different people. It depends on the perspective one takes while trying to understand them. If we talk about the nature, the perspective of the nature is simple. The changes are value neutral. They are neither good nor bad. Whereas, if we talk about the perspective of human beings, there are certain changes which are desirable. The growing of fruits, the ripening of mangoes, the changing of seasons. They are good changes which we desire. Whereas, we fear the changes which are undesirable like floods, earthquakes which lead to loss of life and property. So, these changes are value loaded. This is the perspective of human beings. Now, what is a disaster? What is a hazard? We will be discussing about these two phenomena. Disaster in general and natural disaster in particular are some changes which are always disliked, which are feared by the mankind. Disaster is an undesirable occurrence resulting from forces that are largely outside human control. That means we cannot control the floods, we cannot control the tsunami, we cannot control the earthquakes because they strike quickly with little or no warning, which threatens serious disruptions of life and property, including death, injury to large number of people, it requires mobilization of efforts in excess. For example, certain accidents which are on a smaller scale, we do not require excess of efforts, but an earthquake, tsunami requires mobilization of large-scale efforts. For a long time, the geographical literature viewed disasters as a consequence of natural forces to human beings. We were treated as innocent, helpless victims. Is it true? No, because many of the disasters, they are caused by the mankind. We are creating these disasters directly or indirectly. Our activities, the human activities, are carried in such a way that we are directly responsible for these disasters. Now, human actions. When we say the nature is giving us torrential rain, when we say the nature is giving us earthquake, but the mankind is also responsible. Think of Bhopal gas tragedy, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster near Ukraine, the release of chlorofluorocarbons, increase in greenhouse gases, environmental pollution leading to noise, air, water, soil degradation. These are the disasters for which we are directly responsible. What about COVID-19? This is a biological disaster created by the mankind which has taken the name of pandemic and disturbed the whole of the world. Now, man-made causes of disaster, very simple. We are not at par with the nature. The landslides, the floods, they occur due to deforestation, due to unscientific land use, due to construction activities, multi-purpose projects in the fragile areas. So, we make these disasters happen due to our unwanted activities. Human-made disasters are common and they have increased both in their numbers and magnitude over the years. Various concerted efforts are on at the local level, at the state level, at the national and the international level. But the success has been very nominal so far. It is possible to prevent some of the disasters created by the human actions. As opposed to this, very little is possible to prevent natural disasters. The best way out to is emphasize on natural disaster mitigation and management. In this chapter, we will study about various hazards, various disasters and the institutions who are dealing to make this life more possible, like establishment of National Institute of Disaster Management in India. We had an Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 1993. Various conferences are being held so that we can mitigate these natural disasters. Now, what are natural hazards? What are natural disasters? Let's try to understand. For example, when we have torrential rain in any area where people are less, that is an hazard. Whereas the torrential rain where densely populated regions, they lead to loss of life and property. That becomes a disaster. Hazards are elements of circumstances in the natural environment that have the potential to cause harm to the people or the property. That means they have potential. Whereas the natural disasters are relatively sudden. They cause large-scale, widespread death, loss of property, disturbance to the social systems and life. So, any event can be classed as disaster when the magnitude of destruction and damage is very high. So, children, you understand? We have hazards. We can prevent these hazards into becoming a disaster. Disasters are generalized experiences of people world over. No two disasters are similar and comparable to each other. Every disaster is unique in terms of local, socio-environmental factors. A tsunami may have some different impact in Japan, in India, in Malaysia or in any other country. So, the social response it generates and the way each social group negotiates with it matters. The opinion mentioned that it depends on the people is because of these three important things: the magnitude, the intensity, frequency and damages caused by the natural disasters have increased over the years. There is a growing concern among people the world over to deal with this menace created by all these disasters. Significant changes have taken place in the pattern of natural disasters over the years. Now, when we say perception, there is a change in the perception of natural disasters and hazards. Previously, hazards and disasters were seen as two closely associated and interrelated phenomena. That means the areas prone to natural hazards were more vulnerable to disasters. So people avoided tampering with the nature, tampering with the delicate balance. People avoided intensification of their activities in such vulnerable areas. So the disasters were less damaging. Technological power has given large capacity to human intervention in nature. Now, human beings tend to intensify their activities into disaster-prone areas also. So, what is the result? Therefore, increasing their vulnerability to disasters. Now, human beings tend to intensify their activities into disaster-prone areas, so the loss of life and property increases. For example, think of the floodplains. The floodplains are the belongings of the rivers, but colonization of the floodplains, development projects on such areas like Mumbai, Chennai, along the coast, touching the shores. So, these are the activities of humans. This area is vulnerable to floods, to cyclones, to tsunamis, but people are living there. So, whose fault? Mankind's fault. Natural disasters have caused widespread loss of life and property, but precautions, efforts are being taken at different levels. It is also being felt that damage caused by the natural disasters have global repercussions that are beyond the means and capabilities of individual nations. Therefore, all the nations are coming together to cope up with all these disasters. This issue was raised in UN General Assembly in 1989. It was finally formulated at the World Conference on Disaster Management at Yokohama, Japan. There is a huge description given in your NCERT book. Kindly go through it. You will find this phenomena, you will find this very important, that yes, the international institutions are also concerned for the life of the people. Now, let's classify these natural disasters into various categories, because we have to face them, we have to live with them. People are becoming aware and various steps have been initiated at different levels to mitigate the effects of disasters. Identification, classification of these disasters is being considered as an effective and scientific step to deal properly, to deal efficiently. Now, let's talk about India. You know, all these chapters we have discussed about the physiographic divisions. We have discussed vast perennial, non-perennial rivers of India. We know the vegetation of India. So, India has diverse physical, socio-cultural attributes. It is largely due to the geographical environment, the diversities that we have. So, its vastness in terms of natural attributes combined with its prolonged colonial past, continuing various forms of social discrimination and also equally large population have enhanced its vulnerability to natural disasters. These are the classification of natural disasters. Disasters can be atmospheric like blizzards, thunderstorms, lightning, tornadoes, whereas they can be terrestrial, which are occurring on the surface of the earth like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, landslides. Aquatic, related to water, floods, tidal waves, ocean currents, storm surge, tsunami. And what about biological? COVID-19 is the latest addition to this, whereas other biological disasters are fungal, bacterial, viral diseases such as bird flu, dengue, etc. Now, these are the top 12 natural disasters since 1948. Children, go through them. Try to see how many deaths took place. So, we need mitigation, we need preparedness to tackle all these disasters at a local level, at the individual level also. Let's talk about earthquake. What is an earthquake? The tremors on the surface of the earth. These tremors can be high, these tremors can be low, but earthquakes are the most unpredictable and highly destructive of all the natural disasters. You cannot predict an earthquake, but you can predict the earthquake prone regions. They are of tectonic origin and have proven to be the most devastating at the areas of influence. These earthquakes, they result from the series of earth movements brought about by a sudden release of energy during the tectonic activities in the earth's crust. As compared to these, the earthquakes associated with volcanic eruption, rockfall, landslides, particularly in the mining areas, impounding of dams, reservoirs have limited area of influence and the scale of damage. Whereas, when we have it from the tectonic movements, the large scale devastation takes place. Now, you know the formation of Indian subcontinent. We have done in lesson number 1, we have done in book number 1 also. The Indian plate is moving at a speed of 1 centimeter per year towards the north and the northeastern direction, and this movement of place is largely constantly obstructed by Eurasian plate from the north. So, as a result, both the plates are said to be locked with each other, resulting in accumulation of energy. Excessive accumulation of energy results in building up of stress, which ultimately leads to the breaking up of the rocks and sudden release of energy, which causes earthquakes in the Himalayan region. See the diagram, see the slide shown to you, how the movement of the plates is taking place, leading to the combination of energy. Now, National Geophysical Laboratory, Geological Survey of India, various other departments, they have identified 5 major earthquake zones. See the map given here? Along with the key, along with the legend, you can see we have 5 different zones. Very high damage risk zone, high damage risk zone, moderate damage risk zone, low damage risk zone and very low damage risk zone. Let's try to identify the regions which fall into these different categories. Very high and high damage risk zone. If you see the key, if you see the color, the northeastern states, areas to the north of Darbhanga, Araria, along the Indo-Nepal border in Bihar, Uttaranchal, western Himachal Pradesh, Kashmir Valley in the Himalayan region and the Kutch in Gujarat, they are prone to very high and high damage risk zone. Whereas, there is a slight difference between very high and high. In the high damage risk zone, the remaining parts of Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, northern parts of Punjab, eastern parts of Haryana, Delhi, western Uttar Pradesh and northern Bihar, they fall. Children, wherever you live in India, try to identify in which zone are you in and plan the mitigation strategies accordingly. Now, some of the most vulnerable states are Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttaranchal, Sikkim, particularly Darjeeling and the subdivisions of West Bengal and all the 7 states of the northeast. Apart from these regions, the central western part, particularly Gujarat, Maharashtra, they have also experienced some severe earthquakes. Now, can't we say that this is the most stable zone of India, the peninsular plateau? So, the earth scientists, they are finding it very difficult to explain the occurrence of earthquakes in one of the oldest, the most stable and the mature landmass of peninsular block. Recently, some earth scientists have come up with a theory of emergence of a fault line, and energy built up along the fault line represented the river Bhima, Krishna near Latur, Osmanabad in Maharashtra, and the possible breaking down of the Indian plate. That means these are also zones which are vulnerable, prone to earthquakes. These are the regions low damage risk zone. Remaining parts of the country fall under moderate to very low damage risk zone. Most of the areas that can be considered safe are far from the stable landmass covered under the Deccan Plateau. Now, when we have earthquakes, do you think only loss of life and property? There are socio-environmental consequences of the earthquake. The idea of earthquake, and you can visualize broken buildings, falling of houses, changing the pace of the rivers, too many cracks on the roads, breaking up of the gas pipelines, these are all leading to loss. It becomes a calamity when it strikes the areas of high density of population. Can you think of the Gujarat region where many people became homeless? It not only damages and destroys the sentiments, infrastructure, transport, communication, all the industries and other developmental activities, but also robs the population of their material, socio-cultural gains that they have really acquired over generations. It renders them homeless, which puts an extra pressure, extra stress, particularly to the weak economy of the developing countries. Environmental consequences are also there. These surface seismic waves produce fissures, cracks on the upper layers of the earth's crust, through which water and other volatile material gushes out, inundating the neighboring areas. They are also responsible for landslides, and often they cause obstruction in the flow of rivers, various streams, resulting in the formation of reservoirs. Certain times, rivers also change their course, causing floods and other calamities in the affected areas. So, earthquakes are to be scared, are to be feared. Children, the government is doing something for this earthquake hazard. We have established earthquake monitoring centers for regular monitoring and fast dissemination of information among the people in the vulnerable areas. Using of GPS, geographical positioning system, which you have studied in your practical book, it can be of great help in monitoring the movement of tectonic plates. Preparing a vulnerability map of the country, dissemination of vulnerability risk information among the people, educating them about the ways and means so that we can minimize the adverse impacts of disaster is being taken place. Modifying the house types, building designs in the vulnerable areas, discouraging construction of high-rise buildings, large industrial establishments, big urban centers in such areas is prohibited. Finally, making it mandatory to adopt earthquake-resistant designs and use of light materials in the major construction activities in the vulnerable areas. Children, when we know that earthquakes are not predictable, we should be prepared about it. We should be very much aware that life is precious, we get it only once. So, prepare yourself accordingly. We will study about more disasters like floods, droughts, landslides, cyclones in the next lecture. Thank you. Jai Hind.